Okay, welcome everyone to the July 16th Sewage Commission meeting. And on behalf of the Commission, we'd like to recognize that we're on the unceded territories of the Comox First Nation. And we'll move right into management reports. Is there a seconder? Any questions on the management report? Well, we do have one. Glad I asked. Director Swift.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, we're looking at the odor dispersion modeling to be completed in July, and I'm just wondering if we can have any update on that.
Yeah, we'll see if anyone here is.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I'll ask Chris LaRose, our Senior Manager of Water and Wastewater, to provide some updates.
Good afternoon. Through the chair. So that work is on track. So the field work has been completed. And the consultant RWDI is now, I guess, entering that data that was collected through the sampling of the emission points on the site into their dispersion modeling. And we're expecting to have a draft report back towards the end of this month. And then we'll review that, bring it through advisory, and then work towards that recommendation to the Sewage Commission in September.
Okay, thank you. And I have a second question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm seeing we're going to be developing a communications protocol, and I'm wondering if part of that protocol could be communications back to us regarding the complaints from the residents. So if that could be part of an ongoing communications protocol for us at the Commission here.
Yeah, because we don't have a protocol right now, do we, for that? Or you must at the staff level.
Well, I think we are. I think this is in reference to the communications protocol that we have under development. So there is a draft of that, and we are working in consultation with the local residents to develop that communications protocol. And the current draft does include I believe it's a quarterly reporting out of the complaints received in their nature to the Sewage Commission. So that so you would be receiving, if it proceeds with that as drafted, you would be receiving that that information on a regular basis.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for the questions.
Yep.
Thanks for the answers. I don't see any other questions, so all in receipt of the management report, and that's unanimous. Moving on to reports. Number one is the Comox Valley Sewage Management Advisory Committee minutes. And are there any questions or comments about that? I don't see any. All in favor? And that's also unanimous. Number two, developing a holding tank waste disposal user rate. And could we hear a bit about that from Mr. Warren?
Well, no, not from me, but I'll turn the mic over to Mark Rutten, our General Manager of Engineering Services, to provide a synopsis on the report.
Okay, thanks, James. Through the CAO and through the chair. In rare situations, holding tanks along with the trucking of wastewater to a wastewater treatment plant is the only viable source of wastewater management. The provincial sewage system regulation recognizes this reality and allows for the use of holding tanks in special situations. When holding tanks are used for domestic wastewater purposes, the volume of water can be large and trucking and treatment costs can be high, much higher than for septic systems with drainage fields. In order to support protection of the environment and to remove a potential barrier to the proper operation and maintenance of holding tanks, a reduced holding tank disposal rate is recommended. The reduced rate reflects the reduced treatment cost and higher volumes of wastewater and is not expected to contribute to the proliferation of holding tanks, as policy would be in place to ensure that a holding tank is the only viable solution for a property. If approved, the rate and the applicable policy for the rate would be implemented as part of the Sewage Service Regulation Fees and Charges Bylaw. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have on this report.
So, this came about because of the property out near Comox Lake in particular.
That's right.
So do we foresee other places, or are there other places right now that we know that also have holding tanks and might want to make use of this?
Yeah, so that's a good question. There has not been a survey done we haven't reached out to property owners to ask them to identify whether they have a holding tank. We haven't checked with VHA. There's not thought to be a lot of holding tanks, but there is likely to be some. So this will have implications beyond Comox Lake if it is approved. So, we don't think there's a lot. There's likely not a lot because there are, on-site systems that can be made to work in most situations, but not all. But there likely is some.
Yeah. And I noticed the cost differential in, I believe it was Regional District of Nanaimo, was quite large, $5.20 per, was it 100 liters versus 22 cents? Is that right?
That's right.
So what kind of sizes are these holding tanks? Like how many hundreds of liters?
I don't have the exact volume, but they're fairly large. Each day an average household could produce half a cubic meter of wastewater, so several hundred cubic meters probably.
Yeah.
Fairly large tanks that need to be pumped out several times per year.
Yeah. And the cost to process it seems like it's, a fifth or sorry, a 20th or a 30th of the cost. It's quite a bit less.
Yeah, and that's because the nature of the material is much different. So the septage rate that we have now is for the treatment of, basically the solid material that's removed from septic tanks every 2 to 5 years. So
That's
septic
harder
tank owners.
to.
Yeah, it's much more concentrated, much more difficult to process at the treatment plant. Whereas this material is a lot like the domestic wastewater that's traveling through the pipes and pump stations to the treatment plant every day and being processed on a continuous basis.
Okay. Director Grant, you have a question?
Just more of a technical issue maybe or anything. I'm just wondering how this is going to go because the recommendation just says that we're going to update the policies and rates and then it says staff will develop the policy. Is this going to come back to us before we actually implement it or is staff or are you just going to do it?
No, it'll come back in the form of a bylaw update.
Okay.
So the bylaw, we already have a fees and charges bylaw for the service. That bylaw will be updated to include a special fee for holding tanks and the policy that goes with that fee. So how that fee would apply.
Gotcha. Okay,
to
I was wondering if this was an internal or, gotcha. Thanks.
And Director Morin?
Great, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I can't get my report to load here, but I think I saw that there would be criteria, there would have to be an analysis made that septic tanks are not feasible for them to be able to, for folks to be able to use the holding tank. So there would be criteria for these holding tanks to be approved, basically?
That's right. The report suggests that a registered on-site wastewater practitioner would be required
Right.
to provide a report or a letter saying that there's no other viable
Right.
option for the property other than a holding tank.
Great, thanks.
Who's a practitioner? They have an office in town or?
Yeah, sometimes it's their pickup truck, but yeah. So the way the on-site, the way the sewage system regulation works in terms of permitting septic fields and holding tanks is that there are individuals throughout the industry that are licensed to do the analysis and determine what type of septic system is required, what level of treatment, what type of holding tank might be required. So they follow the regulations, they analyze the particular site, and then they make a determination and file that information with the Vancouver Island Health Authority.
Great. I don't see any more questions, so on receipt, all those in favor? And that's unanimous. Would someone like to move the recommendation? Any further questions? That's great. All in favor? And that's unanimous. And that's it. Anyone want to move termination? All in favor? Thanks very much. Stay tuned for